All right, well, in the last passage we looked at last week, we saw that Jesus showed his authority over demons, and he's now about to show his authority over sickness and disease too. So let's go ahead and read this passage together. This is Mark 1, verses 29 to 34. And immediately he left the synagogue and entered the house of Simon and Andrew with James and John. Now Simon's mother-in-law lay ill with a fever, and immediately they told him about her. And he came and took her by the hand and lifted her up, and the fever left her, and she began to serve them. And that evening at sundown they brought to him all who were sick or oppressed by demons. And the whole city was gathered together at the door. And he healed many who were sick with various diseases, and cast out many demons. And he would not permit the demons to speak, because they knew him. All right, now there's three themes that jump off the page for me when I read this passage. The first one is the most obvious one in this passage, and it's similar to what we saw last week. It's Jesus' authority over sickness. Last week it was a spiritual sickness where Jesus heals somebody with demons, but this week we see it's both. It's both spiritual sickness and physical sickness. And Jesus shows that with just a word or just a touch, sickness must leave when he commands it to. So you see this here. So after he healed Simon's mother-in-law's fever, all right, it says the fever left her, right? And it also says that he healed many, right? And he healed many with various diseases. So it's not like Jesus was an expert at leprosy and then the rest he struggled with. No. He healed so many various diseases. Didn't matter what sickness it was, right? It was no match for Jesus. It says he cast out many demons, right? And he would not permit the demons to speak, all right? And I love that. And these are just all the things that show Jesus' authority. You know, when he said, the fever had to leave. When he said, many were healed. When he touched, various diseases were done. When he said the words and gave the authority, the order, the demons had to leave. He even had to give them permission to talk, all right, which he did not in this case, all right? So it just shows his ultimate authority. So I'm going to write that under theology here, because this is what we learn about God in this passage, is that Jesus has authority over sickness. And that's something we all need to remind ourselves of daily during this coronavirus pandemic, all right? And just remind ourselves of this over and over, every day, saying to ourselves, Jesus has authority over this. Like, I'm not going to get sick today unless he permits it, right? And neither are any of my loved ones. But since I focused on Jesus' authority over sickness and disease last week, I'm not going to spend any more time on that point here. So the second thing I want to point out is that it's a little bit more under the surface here, but Jesus, this is a great example of him knowing and caring first for his newly formed leadership team. You know, knowing and caring first. I'm going to put that here under application. We'll get that, I'll explain it in a minute. But knowing and caring first, we're going to see something that Jesus did and he wants us to do as well. All right. Knowing and caring first is one of Family Legacy's core values, and it comes from our greatest example, Jesus himself. And before Jesus gets any real traction in ministry, remember we're still in the first chapter of Mark, right? He starts with his team. He just recruited some fishermen, Simon and Andrew and James and John, right? His disciples. And he starts with his team, right? By healing one of Simon's loved ones. So he wanted to make sure, obviously Simon was there, but Andrew, his brother, was there, and also James and John, who were brothers. All right, I'm going to circle these, just all these people that it mentions, because the people are important. Simon's mother-in-law, we don't know her name, but it's his mother-in-law. All these people that Jesus is showing his love and care for, knowing and caring first. And why is this so important? Well, Jesus just asked Simon to leave all that he has to follow him. All right, he left his fishing business, right? And Simon won't do that until he trusts Jesus. So how will Simon learn to trust Jesus? Jesus knows that he has to know and care first. By Jesus knowing and caring about the people that Simon cares about, right, his mother-in-law in this case, that's how he's going to learn to trust Jesus. And the only way that Simon can have a mother-in-law is if he's married, right? Now, he doesn't mention his wife here anywhere. I don't know if his wife is still living or not. I assume she is, but we don't know that for sure. But let's just assume he is married and that she's still living. What do you think Mrs. Simon would say when he's like, "Hey, I'm going to follow this Jesus guy. He asked me to follow him, and so I'm going to follow him for a few years. I'll see you later." Right? That would be a hard thing to leave your wife and to do that. And what would she say about that? But Jesus performs this miracle. He heals her mother, Mrs. Simon's mother. And do you think that went far in saying, "Yeah, why don't you follow this Jesus guy? I think you could learn a lot from this rabbi. There's something special about him." All right, absolutely. So knowing and caring first goes a long way in building trust with the people who are around you. And finally, Jesus turns his attention to the needs of others, and that's the third point that I want to make today. Right? So Jesus' first ministry in nearly every location he goes to in the Gospels was caring for the needs of other people. All right? Look at this. So it says here, all right, that they brought to him all who were sick and oppressed by demons. And there's no mention here of Jesus preaching, all right? Or, his first ministry is just loving on people. He doesn't just show up on a street corner and start preaching. He doesn't start shaming people for their sin or their wicked ways. He starts with love, gentle. I can imagine this line of people waiting to see Jesus, right, to be healed after what he does with Simon's mother-in-law. And I don't think that Jesus did what some of these faith healers do, like Benny Hinn and such, where people come up on stage and he touches them and they fall over and then they take them away off stage. No. I think Jesus' healing was much different than that. And he probably spent at least a little bit of time with each person. Gentle touches, right? Eye contact, soothing words of comfort. All right, I think that's what Jesus did when he healed people. And so here's the $1 million question. All right, is that how we do ministry? When we evangelize, does it start with love? With everyone panicked about COVID right now, there's not a lot of love in the world. People are afraid, and when people are afraid, they get desperate. And when people are desperate, they get mean. Maybe you've experienced some of this, whether it's in person or even on Facebook. All right, but you, follower of Jesus, be different. You are eternally secure. And Jesus has already promised to meet all of your needs of food and drink and clothing if you what? Seek first his kingdom. All right? So what should you do in the midst of this virus and all the panic? Right? Seek first his kingdom. Do kingdom work. Love others. I'm going to write that here under application, right? If we're going to do what Jesus did, we need to love and care for others. All right? We're like Jesus when we preach the gospel with our love first, and then we use our words.